A massive amount of our universe is totally random. We don't know exactly why it happened or how it happened, but it happened. And there's a pretty big element of that in video games. But as more and more games rely on randomization in order to create the content that is in the games, it's starting to draw a little bit of ire. For instance, games that are built on procedurally generated content are more and more kind of being looked at like maybe not the best thing in the world, automatically. And that's true, but in the gaming community, the solution is often looked at as the absolute opposite of the problem. And is that really the truth? Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today gameranx asks the question, what's the role of randomness in video games? So nowadays there are an absolute ton of procedurally generated worlds that we transverse, occupy, and take part in. Procedurally generated content doesn't necessarily lack soul. It really depends on how it's used and what kind of things are done through it. But procedural content generation isn't necessarily random either. Randomness is literally the lack of a pattern or predictability in events. So you can make the case that an equation to get a random number doesn't necessarily equal randomness, but for the sake of this video, we're going to treat that as randomness. People really like randomness. People really like hearing that they're going to be able to occupy an endless expanse of different things that not even the designers have seen. And I think that's kind of what pulled a lot of people in for No Man's Sky, and essentially I had to bring that up. It's inevitable in this video, so let's just talk about it. The world that you live in, our world, has a very large amount of absolute constants. Things work in a manner that makes sense to you, because you've seen it your entire life. There's criteria and there's structure. But within this criteria and structure, there is a whole lot of stuff that you would never expect had you not actually seen it. But the spectrum isn't nearly as wide as it could be. Random indeed would produce things way outside the spectrum, things that one might not consider relatable or something even possible, despite the fact that, in theory, it actually is possible that a whole large amount of different things could be real somewhere in the universe. So let me pose a scenario for you. There's a new show on television. It's a sitcom. It follows the normal sitcom formula, but one of the characters is played by an alien that does not speak any human language, can't understand the scripts, and essentially just wants to destroy everything. It's confused, it's frightened, and it's powerful. That show would fall apart really fast. It might be an interesting spectacle, but I don't know that anybody really wants to watch people get killed by some unearthly monster for real. Randomness really only works in a video game when it's within a set of controlled criteria. So the type of randomness that video games require is predictable randomness. Now, from a systematic perspective, the randomness has to not bring the game to its knees and ruin everything. All the physics systems still have to work and be compatible with this type of randomness. And so does all the art, the artificial intelligence, lighting systems, really any kind of system you can imagine that's in the game needs to not be interfered with. And then there's the relatability factor. Imagine if all scenarios in randomly generated environments were also randomly generated. So really, in theory, you have to create scenarios that are based on components of missions if you wish to randomly generate missions. What type of mission is this? Okay, well, we need probably just a few categories of missions that we can choose from, and then we need to interchange elements, like if it's a rescue mission, who are we rescuing? Is there a certain amount of time we have to do it in? Is this a branching story? How does the story branch? The problem with having just a ton of randomly generated planets with randomly generated life on them, well, you, as an individual, simply just go around and see this stuff, means it's more like a zoo than a human experience. And I don't know if you've ever been to a zoo, but once you've seen probably about half the exhibits in the zoo, the rest of the exhibits start to seem kinda similar. There's a lot more planets in No Man's Sky than there are exhibits at the zoo. So you travel from planet to planet, you see new life. It's definitely different. It's not the same, but it's kinda the same. And it's not that they're using this controlled randomness in the wrong way, they're obviously generating new places to go that don't break the game. But what is its role? In No Man's Sky, the role of randomness is too close to the center of the idea of the game. And truly, I'm sorry for continually using No Man's Sky as an example, it's just such a prominent, perfect example of what I'm talking about. There's huge issues with having randomness be so central to the idea. One that I'd consider pretty high on the totem pole: the expectations it creates. If you say this game is made up of a ton of random planets, each completely unique, the expectations that are created are that this experience is going to stay fresh forever. But in reality, that's not possible, because a planet has to be round. It has to have a certain ecosystem, based on how many biomes the game has. The local life forms are all various combinations of different art assets that were created by humans. So while technically all of these things are going to look different, they're all eventually going to start blending together and look the same. But more importantly, they're going to feel the same. And in a game where the philosophy is dependent so heavily on the idea that nothing is ever going to be the same, just technically being different isn't enough. So what is the role of randomness in video games? Well, in my opinion, it's a lot of backdrop-oriented stuff. Having a workable system in place to keep variants of systems randomly appearing is very good. However, if the game is based entirely around simply just having variants in the world and systems, it's probably not enough. There needs to be some kind of human experience for a game to be as interesting as it can be. Whether that means creating robust, well-rounded characters that occupy this random world, or simply knowing that certain types of experiences have to appear every so often in order to mark some measure of importance, the randomness in a game's system stops seeming like it might just be a manifestation of chaotic philosophy and starts appearing more as a tool. And the tool of randomness exists to create a more varied experience. But in order for it to work well, it needs to be done within criteria. Relatively, total chaos can mean something completely different than what total chaos actually is. Saying total chaos actually implies an incredibly hostile environment where nothing makes sense, and creation and construction interbreed into a massive, confusing mess. But if we fondly say total chaos, we may be referring to something like a fight with 8 characters in it. See what I'm getting at here? We have to understand that games are very complex systems, and basing a game entirely on the deconstruction of those systems probably isn't going to yield the types of results that we want. Sure, it's fun, but even games like Octodad, which, believe me, has a philosophy of randomness, had to eventually be refined down to make some sort of sense. So if you look at randomness as simply a tool to enhance creative expression, I think you're on the right path. I think you know what the role of randomness is. And I think what you're going to do as a game designer, assuming that that's what you are, is probably going to be at least good. And I'm very interested. If you are that person, please leave a comment. I'm interested in what you're doing. But otherwise, I'd like to hear your comments on what you think about randomness in video games. What did this video make you think about? If you enjoyed it, please click like, and if you're not subscribed, now is a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. The best way to see them first is a subscription. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.